Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Faith Brynel Talks Law, the podcast, where we explore the journeys behind the legal profession, leadership, and public service. I'm Faith Brynel, an aspiring barrister and your host. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Rory Nunn, who has spent more than 17 years at the heart of the legal industry, helping people navigate legal challenges and connect with the right specialist barristers. Beginning his career as a criminal clerk in 2009, Rory has become a leading voice in improving access to justice through direct access to barristers. Since joining Barrister Connect in 2017, he has played a key role in its growth, building trusted relationships with chambers, partner firms and clients across England and Wales. More recently, he's also taken his passion for making the law more accessible onto social media, where he shares practical legal insights with a growing audience. Rory, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Hi, Faith. I'm very, very well, thank you. It's Wednesday, isn't it? So it's always better than Monday. No, I'm on good form. I'm having a really, really great week, and I'm really grateful to you for having me on the podcast. I'm really excited to have this opportunity. So thank you.
No problem, Rory, and that's excellent. So if you could introduce yourself to the listeners briefly so they can get a sense of who you are today.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely no problem. So I head up the team at Barrister Connect, which I like to think is the country's sort of leading supplier of direct access barristers to the public and business communities. I've got a slightly unusual background for a barrister's clerk in that I came to clerking relatively late. A lot of clerks tend to sort of start in the industry straight out of school or these days out of university and often have sort of warm introductions into clerking roles through contacts and family members. It's quite a close-knit community and can be quite hard to break into. But I came into it quite late. I was 29 when I got my first clerking job. And that came about in a sort of fairly haphazard way. I had a temping job at the Crown Prosecution Service in Bristol, having spent years working in recruitment, which wasn't really for me. And sort of by virtue of that job at the Crown Prosecution Service, the CPS, I got to meet loads of criminal clerks and we used to sort of go out for drinks on Friday after work and chat to them about what they were doing. And I thought their job sounded awesome. So I started applying for clerking jobs and got very, very lucky, landed a maternity contract at a set of chambers called Queen Square Chambers in Bristol, which was a common law set, and walked in and was supposed to be there for 6 months, but they kept me on after that. And my initial focus was purely on Crown Court crime. So I used to clerk with the criminal team. But after I'd been there probably for less than a year, I was kind of handed the responsibility for developing direct access in chambers, which at the time was an area that nobody really wanted to touch. When you had a call into the clerks room from a direct access client, the clerks tended to sort of pretend that they were busy, or everybody would kind of groan because nobody really wanted to engage with this lay person who didn't really know what they were talking about but really needed help. And I think coming into it as a sort of fresh pair of eyes, I saw an obvious opportunity there. So I was quite happy to be handed that as a responsibility, and I've never really looked back. So that was in 2009, and from then I've worked exclusively on direct access. I went from Queen Square Chambers to 3PB, and was then approached by Stephen Ward, who's founder of the Barrister Group, about joining Barrister Connect. That was nearly 10 years ago. It was a brand new sort of startup at the time, so it was a really exciting opportunity for me, but a bit unknown. It's a bit of a leap of faith. But yeah, I haven't looked back. I've focused on direct access continually throughout that period, and the business has gone from strength to strength. Its reputation has grown and improved alongside the growth of the direct access market. And we now have like 100% focus on direct access, raising awareness of direct access barrister services for the general public and for businesses, and sort of playing our part in trying to grow the market even further. So that's the background. So 10 years in at Barrister Connect and heading up the team, and we've been through a lot of change in the interim. But I'm very lucky. I'm one of those people who will tell you that they love their job. No 2 days are the same, Faith. And really looking back at the opportunity, I didn't really know what it was going to become for me at the time, but I made the right move, and I really genuinely couldn't be happier.
Excellent, Rory. And clearly you've got a lot of knowledge and experience in the sector. But what really piqued my interest in what you said was around Barrister Connect and how initially when you came across it, it was a startup. So my question is, what was it about the vision that convinced you to take that leap of faith?
A couple of things. I mean, I've always been quite an evangelist about the potential that direct access has for the bar and also for clients, so for consumers that use direct access barristers. And it was quite frustrating for me working in a traditional set of chambers where direct access, whilst recognised as a valuable sort of workflow or work stream, was never going to be the priority. And I sort of had formed the view that unless to make the most out of direct access, it really has to be your sole focus. That's a view that I've held for quite a long time. Trying to juggle a direct access practice as a clerk with solicitor instructions is a very difficult balancing act. So the opportunity to join a new business, to get in early and focus on a market that I thought had huge potential was key to that decision. But also, I knew Stephen Ward. We'd met a few times over the course of the years preceding joining Barrister Connect. I'd been down to visit the office, and I was always impressed with what he'd set up there and the vision that he had, because I think he recognised the potential of direct access in the same way that I did. So there was a resonance there, which just made me lean into the decision and have faith in it. And yeah, as I say, it was. Those things were really the key drivers at the time. There was still some uncertainty around the wisdom of that move, joining a startup from a really established historical set of chambers.
And it sounds as though that direct access element is not simply another area of legal practice, but it's something that deserves complete focus to unlock its full potential for both barristers and clients. What do you think are the biggest misconceptions that still exist about instructing a barrister directly?
Well, the biggest one, Faith, frankly, is that people just don't know it's possible. That's the biggest issue that we face is educating the public, and a lot of the work that I do these days is about raising awareness through social media. You've touched on that in the intro, and through networking with solicitors and barristers chambers. I think if more people knew that direct access barristers were there as an alternative to solicitors, there'd be much more demand for direct access barrister services because they offer something genuinely different to people. They offer a more flexible and cost-effective way of solving legal problems that don't necessarily require retaining a lawyer from start to finish throughout the duration of a set of proceedings. It's a very, very flexible and ad hoc service. So there's that. I also think that the public perception, and this is something that we're working against all the time, is that barristers are just too expensive. People have this sort of preconceived idea of what a barrister looks like and what they do, and it's usually born out of TV programs and films, and it really doesn't reflect the reality of what the bar is like these days. The reality is that not just at a junior end, even at a more senior end, in some cases, barristers, they do everything on fixed fees when you instruct them on a direct access basis. So you have complete transparency around the cost, which you don't normally have when you use a solicitor. You get a fixed fee for a job, the barrister does the job, and then if you need them to do more work, you agree another fixed fee with them for the next piece of work that they're going to do. So you have control over your fees. And also, people assume that using a barrister is more expensive than using a solicitor when that often isn't the case. The key thing being, as I say, it's an ad hoc and flexible arrangement where you can bring the barrister in and out of your case as and when you need their support. So you're only shelling out on a lawyer as and when you really genuinely need their help. And you get to pick and choose when that is. So actually, for people who are capable of dealing with some of the underlying legwork of their case themselves, who have a decent level of understanding in terms of what the proceedings involve, using a direct access barrister has the potential to save them an awful lot of money and need it.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Isn't available. It's about many people simply don't know that it's an option, and it's encouraging to hear that you're helping to bridge that awareness gap through, as you said, social media, networking with solicitors and working closely with barristers chambers just to let people know the service that you offer. So what inspired, you to get into law? Can you talk to us about your journey? What first inspired you to pursue this profession? And finally, really, were there any defining moments that confirmed to you, wow, yes, this is what I want to do?
I'd love to say that, I wanted to become a lawyer from a very early age and that's what I sort of set out to achieve and all the rest of it, Faith, but that's not actually what happened with me. The funny thing about my journey is that I didn't find true inspiration until after I'd fallen into this career. I didn't have any firm intention to work in legal services. I worked in recruitment for a little while before I fell into the job at the Crown Prosecution Service. And it was all sort of fairly serendipitous. I met clerks, as I say, through that job. I had no idea about the life of barristers and chambers. I didn't know that the role of a barrister's clerk even existed until I met one. And then when I started to meet these people and talk to them about what their day had been like in the pub after work and the stories that they told, they were clearly working with a bunch of really interesting people, dealing with really interesting cases. I had no notion of direct access at that point either. So my gateway into chambers was really a chance opportunity that arose when I was at the CPS. And I think I'm just one of those very lucky people that fell into something that actually turned out to be an extremely good fit, and of real genuine interest to me. The inspiration that's kind of kept me going and has kept me interested in what I do really came about after that, when I was introduced to the idea of direct access, and I realized how much of a game changer it could be for both the bar and consumers alike. So focusing on that and being able to realize some of the ambitions that I held pretty early on, and recognizing that there's real value in what we're all about at Barrister Connect has kept me going. So that's what inspires me. It's the knowledge that, offering people genuine help when they're faced with legal problems that they otherwise probably wouldn't be able to access. Enabling access to justice and getting that sense of reward when you hear back from a client that you've assisted and they thank you for your help in finding the right barrister and helping them get the outcome that they need. I've sort of ended up in a leadership role, and I find that a really inspiring job as well. So having a team of people to work with, to sort of try to get the best out of, supported by an amazing team, is something that, that's one of the reasons I get out of bed every morning and enjoy the job. And finally, I think it's the variety of the job. No 2 days are the same. I'm somebody that gets bored quite quickly in a monotonous environment, and I'm very fortunate to be in a position here where I don't really know what's going to cross my desk when I turn up in the morning. Some days go well, others less well, and often you're confronted with something, after half an hour at your desk that you really didn't expect to have to deal with that day. But that variety really keeps me on my toes. It keeps me sharp, and I think were it not for that, I probably wouldn't have stayed in the role as long as I have.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that perspective. I think for me, hearing that, it's so fascinating how many careers in law begin unexpectedly, as you mentioned, coming across a clerk, speaking to them in the pub, having that very casual conversation that led to something great. And what your journey clearly demonstrates to me, and I'm sure to the listeners, is how sometimes those conversations we have and the people we come across open doors that we didn't even know existed. As you said, you didn't know what a clerk was and the role of a clerk and the intertwining between them and barristers and solicitors, and meeting those clerks and discovering the difference between those roles, between solicitors. For those listening, if they're unsure about pursuing a legal career, what would you say to them about being open to opportunities and, as you said, conversations like the one you had that changed your career path?
I think you hit the nail on the head a minute ago, Faith, by saying, keep your eyes open. I think keep your ear to the ground. You can't prejudge the value of an introduction because you don't know where it's going to take you. I'm not a natural networker. I'm not a compulsive networker. That's not something that has really ever been my sort of natural state. But that said, I have looked after my contacts. Because you never really know what's going to come out of an introduction. You never really know when you might need a helping hand. I do everything that I can to get on well with people and to look after the relationships that really matter. So I think keeping an open mind and keeping an eye out for opportunities is really, really important. Keeping those doors open, don't burn any bridges. But I think fundamentally, what's important, there are two things I'll say here. One is look for an opportunity that is genuinely going to interest you and bring you reward. That's an experience that I've been lucky enough to have. That level of interest coming into work on a day-to-day basis and the reward that I derive from my job has really kept me going. But I think in order, so taking that into account, the other thing is be yourself, right? There's no point rocking up to work and having to pretend to be somebody that you're not. So do what you can to find an opportunity that that really does allow you to be yourself, that allows you to express yourself in a natural way. I'm lucky to be in that position. I don't have to put on my work hat when I come to work. I come to work as Rory. And I think if you can find an opportunity that allows you to be yourself, I think that, for most people, that will solve half the challenge of finding real fulfillment at work. So it's about identifying the right opportunity and giving thought as to whether or not you think it's something that will accommodate you as a person and will allow you to be yourself.
Yeah, excellent. I really like that advice because it focuses on authenticity as opposed to trying to fit a mold of what people might expect for you to act like or to do. And as you mentioned, building those relationships, not burning bridges, keeping an open mind can create those opportunities that you've never even expected. And your point around pursuing something that genuinely interests you is important because passion often comes across naturally. Has there been a relationship or an opportunity that came from simply being yourself and staying open-minded as opposed to actively chasing after it?
Yeah, I think the job the opportunity I had that landed me in my first clerking job was an example of that. I did end up having an interview, but it happened at a stage where I'd already got to know the people that were going to be interviewing me. We got on well. As I said earlier, we kind of got to know each other in an informal environment outside of the workplace. And when I first met them, I didn't realize that 6 months down the line, they'd be interviewing me for a job. And I wasn't pretending to be somebody that I wasn't when that introduction was made. It happened in a really natural way. So, I look back on that and I think, that has led to everything that's happened in my sort of career to date. And it's been a really lovely ride to be on. And I think because it started out in that way, I've not had to change my approach. And I appreciate that's not an opportunity that will arise for everyone. It's about the value of looking after those introductions and those contacts, because you just don't know where they're going to lead you. But I think as a rule in life, trying to be yourself as often as you can is important. In my case, I think, that led to the one transformative opportunity that I was able to capitalize on, which has led to everything else that's followed.
Yeah, that's a fantastic example of why every interaction matters. And because you weren't trying to secure your job in that moment, you were just having general conversation, being yourself, building rapport. And 6 months later, they were interviewing you for a job and it opened the door. And that's why it's really important. And as my parents always taught me, how you treat people, because you never know that you might come across them again. And I have heard of examples where someone might have accidentally said something to somebody and realized that actually that person's their manager or their boss, and then they're in hot water. So throughout your career, you've mentioned you've worked with barristers, clerks, legal professionals across different domains. When you think about the lawyers who have really stood out, what qualities or skills do they consistently possess?
So it's a really, really interesting question. I really value it, actually. First thing to say is that one of the things that I've found most fulfilling about this job is working with interesting people, and the bar is chock full of interesting people. There's no such thing as a typical barrister. They're cut from all sorts of different cloth. They come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And in my experience, and I'm going to answer this question, Faith, through the sort of lens of direct access and how to make the most of it, because that's obviously my focus. But I think barristers who are able to be down to earth in their practice when they're dealing with lay clients, who are responsive to people when they need assistance, whether that's a clerk or their client, and people who are prepared to take the rough with the smooth, are the people who make the best barristers. For me, obviously, intellectual rigor and sharpness and their knowledge of the law all really matter. But when it comes to working with lay clients, again, it's about relationships. And I think there are, if we're looking to work with a barrister, fundamentally, we want to know, A, that they are utterly reliable. So if they say that they're going to do something by a given date, they get it done. We want to know that they're going to be really responsive, so that if we need them to quote for a piece of work, we can send them a request and they'll get back to us really, really quickly. Being able to take the rough with the smooth. So perhaps they're going to have to compromise on their fee every so often to accommodate a piece of work and help a client out. That really matters to us as well. But I think that kind of that ability to balance really solid professionalism as a member of the bar with a down to earth approach to managing your relationship with your client.
Excellent, Rory. Thanks again for sharing such a great perspective. It's really refreshing to hear that, actually, because The bar is often spoken about as if there's one mold for success, but you've highlighted clearly that there isn't a typical barrister. And actually, what really stands out, especially as you said, in your area of expertise and is direct access, is the ability to combine the intellectual rigor with strong interpersonal skills. Those soft skills of communication really shouldn't and can't be overlooked. Being approachable, being kind, being responsive, and being able to build a good rapport and that trust with clients while simultaneously delivering excellent service. And
Yeah.
so I think that's just really important today, how you've highlighted that really clearly throughout each one of your answers, is the importance of soft skills, the importance of being yourself and being responsible for your actions as well. How can students now at this interim stage start developing those skills as opposed to waiting when they qualify?
Um, I think when you say students, I suppose it's about pursuing opportunities, work experience, placements, mini pupilages, things that will expose them to the realities of what And are we talking specifically about aspiring barristers here, Faith, or are we just talking generally about sort of law students?
Yeah, so I'd say it's a twofold question. I'd say initially general advice for law students who might want to segue into being a solicitor, but I'm also more interested in for aspiring barristers. What can they do now, especially with your expertise about direct access and so on?
I suppose the answer probably applies to both. And for me, that is getting as much exposure as they possibly can to the realities of legal practice, whether working in a law firm or working in a barrister's chambers. The two environments, from my experience, are very different, though. So if they're undecided about which route they want to take, then gaining experience of working in both environments through mini pupilages in chambers, or through work experience placements in law firms, I think is the quickest route to getting a real understanding of what clients demand of lawyers and what lawyers demand of lawyers. Going to work for a commercial law firm, what the expectations will be of you from partners, senior partners, and in chambers going into what is quite a sort of it's a relatively unknown environment for most people, steeped in tradition and mystique to a degree. I think going in and perhaps debunking some of those myths about what it's like to work in chambers, and but getting to know clerks as an aspiring barrister is really important. Understanding how clerks work, what their mentality is, and how they can support you is key. And I think if you're able to, as a student, if you're able to access some of those opportunities, that will invariably expose you to the realities of working with clients and managing client expectations as well. Even if you're not doing it yourself, you're going to be witnessing other people do it, and hopefully you'll see people who have developed really successful ways of managing that part of the relationship, because it's such a fundamental part of what being a lawyer is all about. I don't think there's any substitute for that kind of practical experience and exposure through the
Yeah, amazing, Rory. Thank you for tabernacling on that as well. Speaking about the necessity and relevance of exposure that you can get to different areas of the profession, and you mentioned some very important examples: mini pupilages, work experience, and simply observing practitioners can provide those really crucial and tangible insights that you can't really get from a textbook. Where do you personally see the profession heading over the next 5 to 10 years?
It's a really interesting question, and I think the reality is that the next 5 years are going to be quite a disruptive period for legal services. We're already seeing lay consumers engaging with AI to sort of help them try to resolve legal problems. The reality at the moment, Faith, I think, sadly, is that AI is more of a hindrance than it is a help for people. Certainly, that's my experience. People are chucking requests for advice on merits into ChatGPT and Claude and getting these sort of fairly sycophantic responses. I don't think the AI is good enough yet for people to rely on it. And at the moment, it's doing is really sort of giving them unmanageable expectations, and then they require a real lawyer to sort of untangle those and give them an honest opinion of their case. In due course, as the technology around AI improves, particularly where LLMs are concerned, I think that they will become a valuable resource for people. My belief at the moment, though, is that we're a very, very long way away from there being an AI-led substitute for having representation in court. Whilst AI may have a key role to play in the delivery of legal advice for people, in the not too distant future. I think we're quite a long way away from people really backing an AI generated opinion versus getting it signed off by a human lawyer. But I suppose that's down to the consumer themselves and how much they trust in it. But when it comes to representation in court hearings, the role that barristers typically provide, it represents about 50% of our practice here. I don't see that being impacted on by AI in the sort of immediate term, or even in the medium term. To be honest, it's a really challenging time for the profession. I think there's a huge amount of innovation going on across the board. We're trying to embrace it ourselves as a business, and asking me where the land will lie in a year's time is still hard enough. I think things are changing at such a fast pace; it's really hard to be sure. But I like to think that in the future there will be a good balance and that AI will have something of value to add to legal services. It relies on businesses like ours, and other big national firms even embracing it and finding a way to make it work for them and for the consumers that want to use it, and perhaps developing their own AI offerings, that specialize in the areas of law that they deal with, and provide people with a reliable level of support and guidance, which leads them to then instructing the law firm when they reach an issue that AI ultimately can't resolve for them. And fortunately, as I say, part of our bread and butter is arranging representation for people in court proceedings, and I think that the preserve of barristers is safe in that sense for quite some time to come.
Excellent, Rory. Thank you. That's a very thought-provoking perspective. It sounds as if the biggest disruption may not come from lawyers using AI, but from members of the public turning to AI first when they have a legal problem. So while tools like, as you said, ChatGPT and Claude are developing rapidly, they aren't yet a substitute for that tailored and subjective legal advice, particularly where the stakes are high. So thank you very much for sharing your perspective on that. And as you said, you mentioned going into the future, you believe there could start to be that transition positively for AI to have a positive impact in the legal sphere and stratosphere. If there's one message that you'd like my listeners to take away from you, particularly aspiring barristers and those firmly considering a career in law, what's that one message that you'd like them to take away from your journey in our conversation today?
Faith, for me, it's about, if you're at a stage where you're trying to identify the area of law that you want to go into, for example, if you're trying to pick an opportunity, go for the one that offers you genuine interest. Go for the one that you can see yourself working in for years. Become an expert, become a specialist in something that really, really matters to you and that will bring you a lot of reward. Because I think if you can do that, then working doesn't really feel like working, if you know what I mean. Like if every day you're turning up to work and you're dealing with a topic that's of genuine interest to you, where you feel that you can make a difference, then there's a long-term career in that for somebody who wants to focus that as an area of specialism. And I think that applies particularly at the bar, in some cases in some really, really niche areas. So I would say, for me, although I'm not a lawyer myself, I think this is a point that applies to anybody going into any profession. Find something that interests you and is going to bring you genuine rewards, because you want to enjoy your job. You're going to have to do it for the next 45 years. And the other thing I would say is keep innovating. Don't look at what the market around you looks like now. Look at what it's going to look like in 5 years' time, not what it looks like today. Develop your practice in a way that will enable you to consolidate your position in the market as it changes, rather than having to lose ground. So always have an eye on the future. And finally, and this is a point I wanted to talk about a bit more today, but we haven't had a chance. I think if you're either aiming for, or you think you're going to end up in a leadership role, this isn't just about how you work, it's about how your team works. And I think what I've learned over the course of the last few years is that it pays to prioritize culture above all else. Culture has to come first. And without an honest, open and happy culture within your business, nothing else can ever really truly thrive. And it's always going to limit the amount to which you can enjoy your job as well. So focusing on something that's of genuine interest that's going to bring you reward, but putting culture first if you're in that position, where you're building a team and leading from the front, is absolutely vital.
Well, Rory, thank you very much for speaking about the importance of culture in your leadership role. And actually, I'm sure we have at least a minute to ask you this question, because I know that I do actually want to hear about your leadership. So I will ask this one question before I close. But what has been the biggest leadership lesson you've learned over the past 10 years? And how has your leadership style evolved as the business has grown?
So I think we the business was on the receiving end of some private equity investment just over three years ago. And whilst on the face of it, having somebody invest in your business looks like an exclusively positive thing, and that is how it's turned out, it has been it's presented me with the biggest challenges that I have faced professionally. So, we've been on a real journey, accommodating fundamental changes to personnel, working practices, embracing whole new levels of sophistication in terms of analysis and reporting, having to become comfortable presenting at board level and expecting to be held accountable for performance, have all been, that's been a real learning curve for me. But they're all steps that have taken me and our business in the right direction. I've had to, for example, work really hard to learn about digital marketing so that I can work closely with our in-house marketing team to inform, where we allocate our budget, which initiatives we prioritize, that kind of thing in the digital marketing space. I've had to go from 0 to 100 in a fairly short space of time, but also being part of a cross-functional senior management team, which is how our business is structured now, has enabled me to develop a much more in-depth understanding of strategy across the business, the decisions that we take day to day to keep moving in the right direction. And it's really enabled me to lead from the front with the invaluable assistance of my team. And again, down to culture, I think we've built an inclusive culture in which everyone in the team feels part of the success that we achieve. So that last 3.5 years has taught me more than my previous 25 years in work. It's been a steep curve, but it's been a really enjoyable one.
Excellent, Rory. Well, thank you so much, first of all, for joining me on the Faith Brynel Talks Law podcast. It's been a genuine pleasure and interest hearing about your journey from unexpectedly discovering the legal profession and especially the role of clerks to your time at the Crown Prosecution Service and ultimately helping to build and shape Barrister Connect from an early stage startup into one of the leading direct access platforms in England and Wales. And for me, what stood out, throughout our conversation was your passion for your unequivocal and clear passion for direct access and your commitment to making specialist legal advice more accessible. So yeah, thank you again for attending. And to everyone listening, thank you once again for joining me and Rory for another episode of Faith Brynel Talks Law, the podcast. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, do like this episode, subscribe on YouTube or Spotify or your podcast platform of choice, turn on your notifications. Stay tuned for the next episode. You can also connect with Rory on LinkedIn and myself on LinkedIn. And you can also follow the work of Faith Brynel's Insight CIC and Faith Brynel Talks Law as we continue to champion careers, leadership, and access to opportunities within the legal profession. Until next time, I'm Faith Brynel. Remember, pivot and don't panic. Your journey begins now. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Faith. Bye-bye.